Okay, let's dive into one of the biggest transformations in history. Seriously, we're going to trace how a fiery debate about a single book ended up knocking kings off their thrones and, believe it or not, paving the way for our modern political world.
And it really all kicks off with this just one explosive idea. We're in 1521, and this German monk, Martin Luther, says something completely audacious. I mean, think about this. He's basically saying, hey, ultimate truth, it's not locked away in some institution. You can access it. Any person who can read can find it. And with that one sentence, bam, you've got this massive showdown brewing between your own conscience and centuries of absolute power.
And look, this wasn't just some abstract philosophical debate. The consequences were real and they were bloody. I mean, check this out. A king gets publicly executed by his own people. An entire nation is built on the wild idea that power comes from the people, not from God. And these massive empires built for centuries on the idea of divine right, they just crumble. The world was being completely rewritten, often in the most violent way possible.
So this all leads us to the big question, right? The one we're going to unpack in this explainer. How on earth did a debate about theology, about the Bible, unleash a political tidal wave strong enough to topple kings and wipe out empires? It sounds crazy, so let's get into it.
All right, so before we can really get the sheer scale of the explosion, we've got to understand the world it completely shattered. Before all this, you have to realize the political world and the spiritual world weren't just holding hands. They were completely fused. Think of it like a single, unbreakable, sacred system. And the key idea holding it all together was this concept called the corpus mysticum, the mystical body. The thinking was that society was literally a single living body. And just like any body, it has a head, right? Well, in this case, the head was the church and the king working together, divinely chosen. Trying to separate them, that was as crazy as trying to separate your own head from your shoulders. It just wasn't done. And the flow of power here is absolutely crucial to understand. It was a one-way street, strictly top-down. Power starts with God, sure, but, and this is the key part, it doesn't go straight to the king. Nope, it has to flow through the church first. The church was the ultimate middleman, the gatekeeper. They were the ones who gave the king that divine stamp of approval and, in turn, told the people they had to obey.
And this whole political pyramid was held up by an information pyramid. Think about it. Divine truth wasn't something you went out and found for yourself. It was handed down to you, prepackaged by an official interpreter, your priest, your bishop. Your job wasn't to ask questions. Your job was to listen and obey. That's just how the world worked. And then, into this perfectly ordered, top-down world walks Martin Luther. And what he kicks off, it's not just a religious argument. It's a full-blown information revolution. He's about to challenge the very core of how anyone knows anything for certain. And here's the engine that drives the whole thing. Sola Scriptura. Scripture alone. This radical idea that the Bible, and only the Bible, is the supreme authority. Higher than the Pope. Higher than any king. And just like that, the church's monopoly on truth is shattered. The gatekeeper is out of a job. And the fallout from this one idea is immediate and frankly revolutionary. First, suddenly any institution, even the all-powerful church, could be challenged. You could hold them up against the text and say, hey, wait a minute. Second, the individual's conscience becomes a new center of power. It's you and your book against the world. And third, thanks to the brand new printing press, these ideas couldn't be stamped out. They spread like wildfire, sparking debates in taverns and town squares, completely outside the control of the authorities.
Now, what's kind of funny is that the reformers themselves, they weren't trying to start a democracy. They would have been absolutely horrified by that idea. But their religious arguments had these huge, unplanned political side effects. Let's break down the 3 big ways this happened.
Okay, so first, and this is probably the biggest one, the king lost his halo. You remember that whole system where the king got his divine magic, his sacred authority from the church? Well, once the Reformation broke the church's monopoly, that divine force field around the king just disappeared. He wasn't some semi-divine being anymore. He was just a guy. A powerful guy, for sure, but just a guy. Second, the whole idea of what a king even was got a major rewrite. This new way of thinking, called covenant theology, basically recast the king as an employee. Seriously. The relationship between the ruler and the people was seen as a contract. The king's job was to rule justly, and if he didn't, if he broke the terms of that contract and became a tyrant, well, what do you do with a bad employee? You fire them.
And third, there's the really practical side of this. While all these huge ideas are in the air, ordinary people are basically getting on-the-job training in how to govern themselves. You see, many of these new Protestant churches weren't run from the top down. They were managed by elected elders, by councils. People were learning how to debate, how to vote, how to hold leaders accountable. They were practicing democracy in miniature long before it was a political reality. So you can see, these aren't just quiet academic ideas. They spilled out of the churches and universities and onto the battlefield. They were tested with real blood, gunpowder, and steel. Let's look at a couple of places where things got, well, explosive. First up, the Dutch Revolt. You've got these Dutch Calvinists going up against the super powerful Catholic King of Spain, Philip II. Their argument? He broke the contract. He's a tyrant. So in 1581, they issue what's basically a Declaration of Independence. They literally fire their king and, in his place, build Europe's first big republic. Just like that. Okay, so if firing a king was radical, what happened in England took things to a whole other level. I'm talking about the English Civil War. Here, a parliament packed with people influenced by these new ideas doesn't just fire their king, Charles I, they put him on trial for tyranny. And they find him guilty. And then, in 1649, they chop off his head in public. The message could not have been clearer. Nobody, not even the king, is above the law.
Okay, and this is the real aha moment. This is where we see how all these religious ideas become the political ideas we live with today. It happens through this guy, the philosopher John Locke. He basically takes the core concepts that came out of the Reformation and translates them. He gives them a secular makeover. So, the divine covenant between God and the people, that becomes the social contract between the people and their government. The religious duty to resist a tyrant, that becomes the right of revolution. And that God-given conscience, that becomes natural rights to life and liberty. He created a new political language that everyone could speak, regardless of their faith.
So, let's pull it all together. What's the bottom line? What's the lasting legacy of this whole world-shattering revolution? Now, we have to be really clear about this. It's not like the Reformation directly caused democracy. That's too simple. A better way to think about it is as a structural tilt. Imagine a pinball table that's been slightly propped up on one side. The ball isn't guaranteed to go in one direction, but it's way, way more likely to. The Reformation tilted the table of history, making it much more likely for societies to slide away from monarchy and towards self-government. So, just to recap, what were the big forces causing that tilt? 1, it knocked the divine halo off the king's head. 2, it gave people hands-on practice in governing themselves. 3, it destroyed the very idea that any one group could have a monopoly on the truth. And 4, frankly, after decades of brutal religious wars, people were exhausted and looking for a way to live together without killing each other over faith.
And where does this long, winding road finally end? It ends with a complete flip, a total inversion of power. By 1787, authority isn't flowing down from God anymore. It's bubbling up from a brand new source of power, a new sovereign. And that sovereign is we, the people. You know, those 3 little words are the final political chapter of a story that started centuries earlier, with one monk and one very big idea.
And so, this whole revolution leaves us with a question, a huge question that's just as relevant today as it was 500 years ago. When your own conscience tells you one thing and authority tells you another, who gets to decide? Who wins?